Okay, NCAC families. My name is Ashley Gangloff, and I am the executive director of North Carolina Aquatic Club. It is my pleasure, my honor, my true excitement to be on this Zoom with my good friend, Michael Chadwick, extraordinaire in every single sense of the word. One of the reasons why I'm most excited to bring Michael Chadwick back into our NCAC world is that he is a former NCAC swimmer and a star in North Carolina swimming for a long time. So I am hopeful that you will not only remember him, but also be as excited to hear from Michael as I am. Now, the whole reason why I asked Michael to join me on this Zoom call was because I heard from a lot of you that you were just eager and hungry for more information, more stories, more content about what it's like to be recruited into a college swimming program, what it's like to be a college swimmer, what it means, and what doors that might open after college swimming as well. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining me on this Zoom. You're amazing. You're a star. You're like a king of the universe when it comes to swimming. That's the resume I remember in my mind, but please give us more specific highlights from your swimming career just to ground us in this conversation.
No, thank you, Ashley. King of the universe in swimming is a first for me. That's very kind. Thank you.
That's official. I'm stamping that.
No, thank you. So my swimming career dates back to, I can get into the full story, but at my peak, I was a 22-time All-American at the University of Missouri. I got to swim on the USA national team for about 6 years. And as a part of that, I had about at least 10 medals at the World Championships, a few that included gold. And I was fortunate enough to be on 2 world record relays, the 200 freestyle short course meter and the 400 freestyle short course meter. So one of those is still standing. The other one just got broken.
Okay, that's awesome.
Last year, yes. So I got to reach a level of swimming I never really thought I would. I dreamed and hoped I thought I would. Never quite made an Olympic team, although I made a few Olympic trial finals. So I tried my best to get to the highest level of swimming and stay there. And sometimes that's the hardest part.
That is the hardest part. And I'll tell a funny story. Annabelle and I, my daughter and I, were working out in the garage, and Mark also had a world record. I don't even know if it's standing. I hope he doesn't watch this. I'm pretty sure it got broken pretty quickly. I'd have to look that up. But yeah. Annabelle asked about it, and I was like, well, I don't know. Yeah. You'll have to ask your dad about that. So I think that's awesome. And it is such an interesting concept to not just reach a certain height, but to stay there. I think that's speaking from experience. I know I can hear it in your voice that is the hardest thing. Okay. Now, what I think you have so many interesting things about you, and I would love to stay on here forever, but I also want to kind of get down into the nitty gritty about what it was like to be a high school swimmer, transitioning into being a college swimmer. Tell us about your high school swimming experience. Were you good? Did you know you wanted to swim in college? What was that like?
Sure. Well, if you don't mind, can I start a little bit earlier than that too?
Yeah, go on back.
I grew up in a basketball family, so I was expected to play basketball. My dad is 6'7". He played at UNC Chapel Hill, so I grew up a diehard Tar Heel fan. I still am a diehard Tar Heel fan.
And how tall are you?
I'm 6'6", okay. But I was a late 6'6". So when I was about 9-10 years old, I was still very small. And my brother, so both my siblings are much older than I am. My brother's about 6 years older than I am. So my brother is 6'9". And in my mind, he's always been 6'9".
Yeah.
I've always looked at him like he's a big guy, and he's still a big guy. So when I was growing up, I just watched my brother play basketball, and he was unbelievable. And I watched my dad talk about all of his basketball stories. And so that was my dream, to play basketball. And at about 10 years of age, I got into swimming, still played basketball. Summer league swimming is all the rage in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where
Chapel Hill. Yep.
Yep. So that's where most people start. And I remember I started at 9 actually, and didn't make the All-Star team that summer. next summer, actually won the 25 breaststroke at the All-Star meet, which was a total fluke. There's actually a really funny story with it. I'll tell it really quickly. I was out by the pond throwing rocks throwing some rocks, looking at ducks, totally distracted, not paying attention to the meet, and no one could find me for my race. Someone came and pulled me from outside into the line to go swim. We went up to the blocks, got on, and we heard the start go. All the kids dove in the water, and someone false started. So they did the little like beep, 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 beep. I was the only one that stopped and went back. So everybody else swam a full lap. So everybody had to come back and re-race the 25. Well, I didn't swim, so I'm not tired at all. So
You're kind of rested. You felt good.
So I won the race, and I was kind of like the dark horse that came out of nowhere. And so swimming marked me at 10 years of age. And so I was like, I really want to do this, but I still thought basketball was my story. And when I was 13, I actually got cut from the 7th grade basketball team. So when I got cut from the 7th grade basketball team, I very clearly knew that basketball was probably not in my future. I still hadn't hit a growth spurt yet. So I poured all my heart into swimming. And the funny story is, I actually was not that good of a swimmer. I know I had those little moments, but I was in every single group at SwimMac. So at SwimMac, we'll move you up throughout, and then you hopefully get to the top when you're 15, 18. I was in every single group. So there were times when I was at the bottom of the bottom, and kids all around me are dropping off and going and doing other things. And I had to have the foresight to say, I think I can be good. I think if I can be somewhat near the height of my brother when I'm older, I think I can be decent. So when I got to high school, I really clung to this idea of, can I be good and can I be patient? Because I'm not good right now, but if I can just have this idea of what Michael could look like at 18 years of age, hopefully that'll translate to something good in college. And David Marsh, as you guys know him very well, he's just great at seeing talent at a young age.
And so just to give some context, David Marsh was a college coach at Auburn University, a huge winning career, then became the CEO and head coach at SwimMac while you were coming up through those ranks.
Yes, and Coach Mark and coached many others. So David marked me at a young age, and he even told me, you have potential. So that word potential, I talk about all the time. When I heard what that word meant, I always said, I have potential. It means you have something in you that isn't visible yet, but at some point will come to fruition.
Okay. And so I have another question.
Yeah.
Sometimes that word potential can be really daunting,
and
sometimes it can be really inspiring and motivating.
Yeah.
How did you manage that? Was it always something very positive and influenced your behavior in positive ways, or was that a tough thing for you to manage?
It was the best word I could ever come across as a kid, and one of the hardest words to cling to when you're a professional athlete.
Yeah.
But at some point, that potential has to take frame. And I had such a long-term vision in the sport that I told your husband this a couple of times. Sometimes what was really hard was when I'm actually on that podium or about to go into that race, actually coming into the idea that this is what that potential is becoming into this. So I had to actually get to the point where I said, I'm no longer thinking about 5 years from now. I'm thinking about right now. That's
it's time. Yeah.
Yeah. But
okay.
Growing up.
So I jumped ahead. So now you're in high school, you have potential. You have a coach, a very elite coach who sees you and is being clear with you that he thinks he sees something in you.
Yep. And he kept me from quitting. And there was a few times I really did want to quit because I didn't always see it. So I always say before the age of 15, it's intrinsic. So I'm saying this wrong. Before the age of 15, it's extrinsic. It comes from the people around you. The people around you have to see something in you that you don't see. So before the age of 15, it's parents, it's coaches, it's mentors. They just see something in you that you might not necessarily see. After the age of 15, it takes what's in you. It becomes intrinsic. So you have to actually believe what everybody else sees around you. And that's usually around the point where kids start to quit. And that's okay. And I actually teach this all the time. It's okay if swimming is not your thing, but you have to recognize that people see your giftings, and they might see your giftings in swimming. They might see your giftings in other areas, but you have to believe at a certain point that what people see around you, you have to now point into something. And so for some people that's swimming. For me, it was swimming. if it's not swimming forever, well, guess what? You're going to have to translate that to something else. And all that we can hope is that swimming helped carry you to the thing that's actually your gifting.
Yeah, prepared you for the next thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in high school, you have potential, you think you want to swim in college. There were some moments where maybe you thought this isn't for me, but those extrinsic motivators kind of kept pulling you back in.
Yes.
And so when it was time, when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, back then recruiting was a little different. I think it was July 1st after your junior year.
It was.
Okay, so that's different now, but at that point, July 1st marked the beginning of recruiting season.
It was, and I was a breaststroke IMer. I did not even touch freestyle much at all. And I got my junior national cut the summer before my senior year by 0.02 seconds. So my mom always jokes, my life was kind of defined by 0.02. If I would not have
that's the way for most of us, actually.
It is. Yeah. It's funny too, because I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to swim in college. And going into my senior year with all these kids around me that were really talented at SwimMac, and they're already signing with Auburn and Chapel Hill and NC State and Cal Berkeley in Texas. And so I'm kind of left behind, and I'm thinking, am I even going to have a chance to swim? And I had some conversations with Auburn and NC State and Chapel Hill and some with Missouri, but I'm realizing too, a lot of that was David Marsh and some coaches that just kind of feeding my name out there saying, keep an eye out for this kid. So, I mean, I'm a perfect example of just, I am really appreciative of people who went to bat for me when I didn't necessarily, have that myself, because they saw my potential. So
now and I didn't think we were going to go here, but that is so important. I mean, in professional life as an adult, in swimming life as an athlete, as a coach, all the things. I mean, your network, those, the social capital that you have, those relationships, the people that know you and believe in you, also advocating for you. I mean, it's a game changer. It
is. And so it was very obvious that I was supposed to go to the University of Missouri. So when Mark was at Missouri, so I was Mark's, can I tell the story?
Yeah, tell it.
Okay.
And I'll tell it from the other end, because, I hear all these phone calls around my kitchen table. Yeah.
We'll see if they line up. But so Mark had just taken the job at the University of Missouri, and Mark called me one day, and you answer your phone. Now in the year 2023, you don't really answer phone calls you don't know the caller ID to. 10 years ago, in my stage, you're answering every single call that comes to your phone because you don't know who it is. And so I answer the phone, and all I hear is, Michael Chadwick, this is Mark Gangloff. I didn't hear what school he said, because I just was like, why is Mark Gangloff calling me? I just watched him at Olympic trials like a week and a half or 2 weeks before that.
Yeah. So I mean, he had probably transitioned from swimming to coaching in that week that he called you. Yeah,
exactly. And so I did not know why Mark Gangloff was calling me. All I knew was he was coaching. And so at the very end of the conversation, I was like, okay, yeah, like you can come visit me. That'd be awesome. He's saying he's going to be in Charlotte next week. I was like, what school are you at again? And he's like, University of Missouri. And I'm not even kidding. I did not even really know where Missouri was on the map. I mean, I being in Charlotte, North Carolina, University of Missouri was kind of outside my, wheelhouse and it hadn't even been in the SEC yet. So, all I knew was Mark Gangloff was coming to my house in a week. And so I had to get ready. And I could not tell you how excited I was for that at-home visit. And so just to give you a little bit of context, when I graduated from high school, I was 6'5", 155 pounds. So there was not a whole lot of, I don't
know how you kept your pants up. I mean, I feel like, that's a string bean. Yeah.
I was tiny. All I can remember is Mark. So 2 things. Mark is in my house eating at my table. And there's 2 things going on. One, I'm thinking about, I can't show him around the house, because if he comes upstairs in my bedroom, he's going to see that I have an ultra swim poster of Mark Gangloff in my bedroom. And this guy's going to get really freaked out that I have a poster of him in my house. The second thing was, he knows how skinny I am, and I need to eat as much lasagna as I possibly can tonight. So I'm not kidding. I sat there, and I think I ate the whole time for the 2 hours that we were there. I probably had like 4 pieces of lasagna. And I was just like, I need to show him I'm trying to put on weight. And in hindsight, now that Mark knows me a little bit better, it's like, that's exactly my personality. Is all the meals I've had with him, I'm just sitting there and just eating,
just housing it. Yeah.
So it was after Mark came and did that, And then I finally went on a trip to University of Missouri. It's funny, when I had to get down to my decision, it became, am I going to go to University of Missouri or am I going to go to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill? That was where I was trying to decide between. And it didn't work out for UNC. So I was like, I'm all in for University of Missouri.
Yeah.
And I never thought twice about it. And now in hindsight, that was exactly where I was supposed to go. And how fun is it that I got to end that stage of my career, I guess, in Chapel Hill with Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. So then fast forward, you swim at Mizzou, have a wildly successful career at the University of Missouri. And for those of you who might not have been following Missouri swimming, and that's okay. Yep. The University of Missouri was going through this really radical change in its program, where it went from not being really even having any representation at the NCAA championships to competing for a top 10 finish. And Michael, you were such a huge part of that transition that I know that your story, in Mark's world, is such an important story in his coaching journey, but is also for that program such an exciting and compelling story in the history of that program. And I think that's one of the things that I just love about really athletics, any sport. And we see all these documentaries, right? We see Swamp Kings on Netflix, and we see, Breakpoint and all these sports stories. And so much of it is because they are so human and they are so wonderfully raw. And it's not only life-changing for an individual athlete, but it is program changing for all of the people involved in a program. And that's always so exciting to follow. So, you certainly are part of that. Now, from our perspective, or at least mine, Mark is a college coach, was then, still is now. He's on the phone all the time. I hear so many names, of these people that he's talking to. And I remember him coming home and saying, David just called me. There's some kid in Charlotte. He's super tall. I don't know if he's going to be good, but David thinks there might be something there. And I was like, oh, that's exciting. Yeah. And so, it was from that very first instant before he even talked to you. And then I remember this whole kind of cycle of phone calls. I remember him going out on the visit. I remember so many of those things. And then even once you got to Mizzou, I remember, spouses often hear about what's going on in anyone's workday, but in this lifestyle where we're just kind of all in as a family, I would hear about your progress and what's Michael doing and what's he not doing and what does he need to do? And oh my gosh, now he's doing it. And, it's this really wonderful, imperfect journey. And so, we certainly saw that on the back end, but I so remember Mark saying, David told me about this kid. I mean, it was like, okay, here we go. And there was so much anticipation for what that could be. So those certainly align.
And what's cool too about the whole thing is Missouri was the only place that even offered me a scholarship. Nowhere else would even touch that. So much of that is Mark's forward thinking, trusting David. Greg Rodenbaugh as being the head coach, what he saw in me as well. It's just there was so much that I guess people had to see down the road that I thought I saw, but I also had to have a lot of trust. And once I got to Missouri, and then once I got into a program where my nutrition got figured out, and we understood why couldn't I put on weight. I found out I was burning 9,000 calories a day. That they put a heart rate monitor on me for a week, and they couldn't understand why my metabolism was so high. I would go to sleep and burn 3,800 calories. So they would have to make me wake up and eat peanut butter and jellies and protein shakes just to keep my weight on. So once we understood kind of my physiology and why what was happening, we kind of made a plan. And all the coaches were like, okay, now that we know that this is kind of a unique situation, we can actually coach this. And when I get sick, we don't need to freak out. We can just give them the right resources and just trust it's all going to work out. And actually, what's funny is when I would get sick, they could actually trust that I was going to get a chance to breathe and put some weight back on and then go back into training.
Yeah, so that is wild. So that's really interesting. And I, as an athlete, I had a similar experience to where I, was however good I was, had however much potential. And then it was like, I got to college and all these new resources
Mhm.
were now all of a sudden available, and it changed everything. So can you tell us even more about that? You got set up with a nutritionist, which is common among a lot of college programs, not all, depending
Yep.
on the college's resources or the program's resources. But in your specific instance, what
Yeah.
other resources do you think changed your swimming
Yeah.
from going to high school to college?
A few areas. So having someone that was deeply, deeply invested in my stroke and what it looked like and what it should look like. And I each year at the University of Missouri was a little bit different. I actually was one that benefited a lot from Greg Rodenbaugh, benefited a lot from Andrew Grievers, benefited a lot from Mark Gangloff. And all three of them had incredible insight for me on, it's almost like Mark taught me how to pace swimming and how to swim fast and swim consistently fast. Andrew taught me how to swim really fast and be strong in the water. And Rody taught me how to be in shape and
Yeah.
how to just, if I'm going to go do a 200 IM set, I'm going to go do a 200 IM set. And I had to learn to be comfortable with that. And so all three of those players were incredibly important, and they had giftings that the other person maybe didn't have quite as much. And then I had weight coaches who said, okay, you're this strong, but I need you to be this strong. And then I had a nutritionist who said, okay, you're weighing in at this weight, but I need you to weigh in at this weight, and I need your body fat to be here. Like, yeah, your body fat percentage is at 4.8, but why don't we take it to 5.6 or 6 and actually have a little bit of room to work with and not
Mm-hmm.
so lean. And then, I had trainers who said, hey, your shoulder is not operating the way it's supposed to, so we should get this physical therapist to help reteach you how to move this joint. And so every person that I came in contact with just kind of had the answers. And I think where I've always benefited from is when I can trust that somebody has the answers, I don't necessarily have to, I'll give the hard work. So if I
Yeah,
can,
you'll lean into it. You'll do what they tell you to do. You just need somebody to tell
yes, I'll provide the hard work if you provide me the direction.
you.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I got with Missouri. And so it took my I'm sometimes my biggest problem, that I overthink things, and I want to figure it out, and I want to know why, and I want to know how, and I want to overthink this, and maybe I need to try this. But sometimes as an athlete, you just got to trust that people have, the people that are supposed to be in charge can lead you, and you just need to commit to showing up and giving an effort. So
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so in my other world, I am in education. I have been a professor and a professor. I teach classes, and it's so funny because I oftentimes, I'm so quick, and I want to be so quick to say, you guys are smart. And like the coaches,
yeah,
Michael, you are so fast, or you will be so fast,
yeah,
but you came here for a reason.
right.
So don't resist the reason you came here. And that's to get the access to the expertise, to the experience, to the education. And so it sounds like that was your posture going into it, is okay, I'm here,
Mhm.
make me into the swimmer I want to be.
Yeah, there's a really good example that I gave. It was kind of a story, and I've heard it a few times, read it in a couple books. But there's a story about a guy in martial arts going and asking a mentor if he'd mentor him, and they sit down and they're having tea, and the mentor begins to pour into this mentee's cup, and all of a sudden they're talking, and the cup starts overflowing like crazy, and the mentee goes, master, you're overflowing my cup. And he said, exactly, until you're ready to pour out what's already in there, I can't pour in what I know. And so I think that's really applicable, is like, if we come into situations and we have our cup 3/4 full and we say, please fill my cup, well, there's not much room for people to actually pour into it. Actually, it's just going to call an overflow. And so I think what has to happen is you have to, in situations where you're trying to learn and be educated, you have to come in with an empty cup, and you have to say, I'm emptying out everything that I know so that you may fill it up. It's like, I'll provide the cup, but you have to fill in what you know.
Yeah.
And the reality is as human beings, we have to be able to do that in different situations. And we have to learn that at a young age, because I've now sat under many different people that have been way smarter than I am. But I've heard this example in leadership. The best way to see a true leader is to see your fruit on other people's trees. And anything that you see on me that it's like, wow, that looks really good, that's fruit from other people that just been invested in me. So
That's
I have
good.
fruit from David Marsh, I have fruit from Greg Rodenbaugh, I have fruit from Mark Gangloff, I have fruit from David Chadwick, my dad. And all of these people that, have invested in me over the years, like I want to be a product of that. So that's the biggest thing. I think sometimes in today's age, we want to be so much of our own thing. And in the reality, there's not many things we need to recreate, because people have been doing this for a long time. We can refine and make better. So there's certain ideas that maybe you can elaborate on, but to go back to the drawing board on every single thing, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. So
if we bring all these ideas back to, if an athlete maybe knows that they want to swim in college or beyond high school, and they start looking at a program that's a good fit for them, right?
Yeah.
Some of us might be super elite. Some of us might not be elite, but there still is likely a program out there. How can someone think about finding a coach or a coaching staff or a program that will pour into their cup?
Yeah.
What's that like, or what advice might you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. The number one thing I go back to every single time is go where you're valued, because where you're valued is where you're going to grow. You could be let's give an analogy. You could be the best looking, tree ever. If you don't go in good soil and get good sunlight and get good proper care, you're not going to last very long. You could start out being the best thing ever. The reality is you have to go into good soil and you have to get good nutrients. So that is the number one thing. I mean, that's not always an easy thing to find out when you're getting recruited. So I would look at people's experiences. I would look at track records. I look at how long the coach has been there. I would look at, do athletes like them? There's a lot of factors there. And then I would lean heavily into your own perception of, does this seem like a place that will value me as a person and want to see me get very good? Some programs, care most about your swimming ability, and that's important. But I think the most important thing is, are they setting you up to be a person who can function after you're done swimming? Because swimming, again, is as we call it, a vehicle. We can only drive this thing so far before we hop into a different vehicle. So our goal is that after this vehicle stops and we can't drive it anymore, the next one we get into, we're not constantly looking back and thinking about that last thing. We're appreciative of it, and we're thankful of how far it got us, but we have to keep going. So, in my current stage of life, I'm a husband. We've been married for 6 years. We have a 2.5-year-old, and we have a second boy coming in January. And if I continue to live in Michael as a college swimmer, I'm not going to do very well, just going back to what my lifestyle is when I'm getting woken up at 6 a.m. with a crying child. So we have to be able to use our giftings and use the lessons that we've learned for our future things that we take on. So, and for me in that situation, it's me as a student pastor at a church, it's me as a husband, it's me as a dad, it's me as everything that I am and everything I'm going to be. I have to use those things.
Okay, so find good soil and a program that can provide you the nutrients. Love that. So those are the things that you would advise in looking for. And all of those are kind of wrapped up in this idea of finding a place that values you. And I would probably also add in where your values align, right? Exactly. So that values you and that your values align. Okay, so now what about the team aspect? Because that is something that is also very different for a lot of swimmers, moving from a high school age, whether it's a club team or a school high school team, moving into a college program. Yeah. Can you kind of briefly tell us about the differences there, and if that was something you were looking for, what that was like?
So that's an interesting question, because teams change in 2 years. You know this. So your team that you have as your freshman year is going to be a completely different team that you have your junior year. The things that stay consistent are the values and what's passed down. So when I was getting sold to the University of Missouri, I was not being sold.
And I'm going to stop by saying it's different because every year there are, not quite a quarter of the team, smaller than that, but a portion of the team is graduating off, and then you're getting even more freshmen backfilling. So the people on the team, the composition of the team is constantly different.
And you have to have a culture that's being established by the coach, by the leaders, that's being passed down, if it's a healthy culture. Now, when I was getting sold to go to the University of Missouri, I was not being sold, this is the place that you're going to come into and you're going to keep the same. I was being sold, this is a place you're going to come into, and we want to make it into something that's better than it's ever been. So I was never accepting to come into the University of Missouri with looking around saying, oh, this is what I'm signing up for. I came in saying, I'm going to change this place in 2 years. So that I always had this mindset of, this is not the way I want it to be, but I have an idea of where I want it to be. And I was fortunate to have a freshman class that was very impactful. So we had people who shared that same value system. And so that's not the situation for every team. Some teams have a historic legacy of just raising up leaders, raising up talented swimmers. And your job is going to be to go in there and keep a legacy. If you walk into a Texas, your job is going to be to maintain,
or like a Kenyon, or
yeah,
I mean, there are
yeah,
these kind of these long standing histories
yeah,
in some programs. Yeah.
yeah. You don't have to reinvent anything. You just there's things in you that you'll add value to the system. But in my unique situation, we really had to overhaul the University of Missouri, and so that leaned more into probably my gifting. So, I always joked, if I would have gone to some of these other schools, I may have just been another face in the crowd, because I'm not sure if you had all of these NCAA finalists that were around me, I may have gotten lost in the crowd a little bit. So having the opportunity to go in the University of Missouri and have a lot of hands-on experience, that was really impactful. And I had the trust of the coaches, and I had the trust of my teammates. So I guess my encouragement there would be, know your giftings, and know, do you want to go in and help be a leader and help change a culture, or do you want to go and continue to build?
Yeah.
And you kind of got to have the discernment to know where that is and what program that is, because coaches will usually be pretty straightforward, and you can kind of tell if the coach is like, I'm fine with where my program is, or I'm trying to build this and I'd like for you to come in and help. And
and I see you as being a part of this change.
yes,
Like you, yeah. It's interesting because I think so often we have this very simplified dichotomy between, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or a small fish in a big pond?
yeah,
And I don't think that does the scope of options justice,
yeah,
because what you're talking about is, it's not just from a swimming perspective. I'm so good, I'm going to a program where I'm going to be the best swimmer. That's really simplified. Maybe that is a part of the description of a program, but I think from a cultural perspective, am I looking for a culture that I'm going to come into and be expected to fold into and maintain? Am I coming into a culture where I'm actually being pushed to be the change?
Yep.
And that, I think that is a really fascinating dichotomy, that it seems like it should be correlated with big fish, little pond, little fish, big pond, but it's different, related, but different.
Yeah. And it takes a team. I mean, and there's nothing that you singularly can do by yourself. It does take, there was different people on our team who had different giftings. And so, I was able to identify with some of the coaches who are the ones who, when you're having a bad day at practice, you're just going to get in their lane, because they're just naturally a joyful person, and they're going to make your day better. And you kind of got to recognize where your own limitations are, and where there's these pieces on a team. And that's why I love teams so much, because you kind of look around and you say, every single person here has a part of this. And there's some people who, as a freshman, maybe you're not going to see their true giftings, but by a junior, you turn around and you say, you have come a long way.
Yeah.
And I would say
it's the patience that you talked about early on. I mean, you're coming into the program. Some people are coming into a program with potential, and you think it's gonna come into fruition, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But you talked about that earlier, and I love that. And so same thing happens in college, right? Sometimes you show up and you're there, and sometimes you show up and you and the people around you are like, okay, we think you can do it, but you're gonna have to walk through that.
Yep. And each year is different. And in my freshman year, I didn't do things perfectly. I mean, there were things that I wish I would have leaned in more to, and not been so sheltered here, and maybe talk to this teammate differently. And it's hard. I mean, you're 18 years old, and you're jumping into a whole new world. And so, growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, to go into the University of Missouri, and everything is different. I mean, you're starting completely fresh. What a great opportunity to grow into who you are. And it might take some time. So I think you got to give yourself a lot of grace too, to recognize, like, it might take a year or two, or maybe even 3. I had this conversation recently with a young man who is a very talented swimmer, and could go on and do some pretty incredible things. And I asked him, is your whole career dependent on you making the Olympic team next year? And he said, I don't think so. I said, well, if you look back and you made it in 2028, but missed it in 2024, would you look back in 10 years and say, my career is a success? And he said, absolutely. I said, so don't overthink this next year and then count yourself out for the many more years of incredible that you have. And we have to have the forward thinking to say, like, each year, yes, it's important, but your whole career could be defined by one swim at one time, at one race. I mean, you could have one NCAA final that you look back on and say that was the fruition of 15 years of swimming.
Yeah.
So it takes time. And our sport is just kind of unique like that. It's the little moments. It's that one 20, 30, 2-minute race maybe that you look back on and you say, wow, like that was that was what I worked for.
That was it. Well, and I did it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that. Okay, I did it.
Yeah.
Now you are incredibly joyful in hindsight, and maybe even as you look ahead, there is such optimism and hope, and things are a growth moment. But I mean, let's get real. Things are real hard in college swimming. So
Sure.
Can you give us maybe your top 3 or 5 things that were more challenging than you ever dreamt were going to be challenging?
Yeah. The hardest thing for me was definitely adapting the lifestyle of I'm exhausted. So, I am someone already who probably is too loose with my tongue on I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. And that actually became something that frustrated people around me, was we're all tired, and yet I sometimes lived in that too much. So I had some really honest conversation with teammates to be like, we just have to be in this together, and we need to stop hearing you talk about how exhausted you are. So that was my big realization freshman, sophomore.
Good for those teammates.
Oh, very
right?
good.
I mean,
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Because you're waking up at 5 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday mornings. And so you just get into this rhythm of just, I mean, going hard all the time. And swimming is just like that. So I can remember always about the end of September, I would hit this point where I start waking up on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings, and I'd be fine. I mean, it took about 5 weeks or so for me to really get into it. And then you kind of struggle to maintain it a little bit, but just getting into that each year and it was very challenging for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the lifestyle, being exhausted, you
Yeah.
didn't add this as one of the challenging things, but having now teammates that do hold you accountable and aren't afraid to tell you when you need to shape up. Because, that is both a, blessing and a curse. It can feel really bad, but can be really good. So,
and having teammates that you might not necessarily pick as friends, that's a reality.
That's right.
You're sitting next to people who are recruited from different countries, different backgrounds, and you have to have you have to be okay to recognize that a team is not always going to be people that you are just going to go out and hang out with all the time.
No, yeah. And they don't have, and sometimes it's actually better that way. I mean, and it's not accurate to say your teammates are like coworkers, because I think teammates are something so special. But y'all are there to do a job. I mean, you're there to get something done together. And sometimes that works out when everyone is friends. Sometimes it's actually better if not, you don't have to be best friends with everyone. Yeah.
And the last thing I'd probably say is just managing it with schoolwork. It's weird to sit in these two places of like, this school is going to set me up for the rest of my life, and the swimming is going to set me up for these next few years, realistically.
Right.
So I probably prioritize swimming more than school personally, just in a general, like where my totem pole was. But there are people who swimming was down here and school was up here, and that's okay. I mean, some people look at swimming as an opportunity to get to school and then make school a priority. And I was someone who said, I just really, really want to see how good I can get at swimming. So, those 12 o'clock papers that are due, and it's crunch time and it's 11:42 and you're trying to figure out how to put these last few sentences in, and then you have 5 a.m. workout the next day. That's a different world than maybe you're used to, and you don't have your parents or anybody keeping you accountable. So you have the maturity to say this is a priority. And you can't say I always did it well, but that was hard.
Okay. Michael, again, we could talk for hours and days and weeks on end. I absolutely love hearing from you. But I think it's time to wrap up this particular part of our conversation.
Yep.
Can you leave us with, well, before I ask for final thoughts, give us the 2-minute update on where you are and what you're doing right now, and how swimming has perhaps informed or set you up for that.
So currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a student pastor at a church for middle school and high school. So work with 100+ kids. It's awesome, love it. It's the best thing I could be doing. Never thought I would be doing it. Grew up in a ministry family and always counted myself out in that department, but became very obvious a couple of years ago that was where I was supposed to be. That's my full-time job, and then I also coach my old high school swim team. So I didn't give up coaching completely.
We knew you wouldn't.
Yeah. So they called me and asked if I'd do it, and I'm really enjoying that. So that starts up in November. I have a swim lesson kind of business I've been running a little bit in Charlotte, so that's been pretty fun. I've really enjoyed teaching the sport, so much so that it actually got me back in the water a little bit. So a quick update: I'm training for a 50 freestyle right now for next summer. So just in my own desire to, I'm 28, with a second kid on the way. I also want to value just being in shape and being and still working for something physically. So I kind of got to this point where I was like, it's either an Ironman or it's going to be a 50 freestyle. So in true sprinter,
Which, can we pause and say, how funny is that?
Yeah,
I mean, those actually could not be more different.
Exactly. So in true sprinter nature, I said, I'm going to pick the shorter option. So
that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Great.
So I've been swimming a few days a week, just trying to get strong. I'm trying to get really just as strong as I can. So and in hopes just next summer, my goal is just to get a really good picture with my sons next summer, and maybe and spark something in my son Grayson, who'll be 3.5, to say, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, and then hopefully then I just put a cap on this wonderful sport.
That is so awesome. That is just really wonderful. I mean, so many full circle types of moments in your story for sure. And nothing feels coincidental. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what are your final thoughts for our NCAC families, our NCAC swimmers, with regard to potential and making decisions about how to kind of get the most out of your swimming career, whether or not that includes college swimming?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say would probably be, don't be afraid to dream. So, fear has a really interesting way of making us make really wacky decisions. So don't make decisions out of fear. Make decisions out of honestly love. So if you love to swim and you can't imagine life without swimming, well, that's a really good thing. So I would put all of your time and energy into trying to craft a beautiful life in swimming, until you can't do it anymore. And if you ever get to the point where you say, I don't love this anymore, well, then have that honest conversation to say, okay, I don't love this anymore, but I refuse to not go through this life with purpose. So find something else that you can pour that love into. I think I see too many people who say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And now they have all the time in the world and they fill it with things that are just not going to help them grow. So don't stop swimming and then go into just letting yourself sit on the couch all day. So we are designed to live purposeful. So if you are a swimmer, you are by nature used to doing a lot of things that you probably don't want to do. And that's a good thing. That'll serve you really good in life, because there's a lot of things that you're going to have to do that you don't want to do. And I think swimming is one of the best sports, if you use it correctly, to set you up for a life of really just pushing the boundaries of what you thought you were capable of.
Yeah.
It's funny how you moving through a liquid and trying to decrease a time on a clock can translate to being a good father, a good mother, a good husband, a good wife, all these things that maybe wouldn't seem like they translate, but they do. And being a good coworker, and being a good, these things translate. So the better and the harder you work in swimming now, and the lessons that you learn now will help you down the road. And you may not seem like it when you're 14, 15 years old, but I promise you, most people don't have the foresight to recognize that what they're doing right now in this sport is going to help them later.
Yeah.
So that includes if you're going to go be an NCAA All-American or an Olympian, or if you're going to just hang your cap up at your senior year and say, thank you, swimming. Either way, there's a place.
That is awesome, Michael. Thank you so much. This is the conclusion of our talk with Michael Chadwick, who is a former NCAC swimmer, swam at the University of Missouri, represented the United States all over the world. And I'm so thankful that you were willing to spend some time with us to share your story and really provide some just wonderful words about what swimming has given you and what you hope swimming gives to other people as they navigate high school swimming and maybe beyond. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.